Welcome to this DaVinci Resolve Fusion node breakdown. Today's node is the Swizzler node. So we're going to jump into Fusion and we're going to add a Swizzler node. So shift space, Swizzler node. And what the Swizzler node is it's a tool that allows you to combine one or more image layers or their channels into a custom made layer. And acts like a channel Boolean node, but it does a lot more within the compositing world. And this is DaVinci Resolve Fusion's version of the shuffle node that you've used in Nuke. If you've used Nuke and used the shuffle node, this is somewhat what it does. And in deciding how I was going to do this today, I could bring in multiple layers, but it would end up turning into a compositing video more than a video on the Swizzler node. So I'm going to keep it super simple, and I'm just going to bring in one multi-layer EXR. And this multi-layer EXR I will make available to members. So if you guys go over to the little post we have up on the channel, you can go and you can download this EXR. And it's just 2 seconds long. It's just a super quick EXR that I made in Blender and exported, and I exported it incorrectly, but it'll allow us to actually go over troubleshooting and to do other things when it comes to compositing and changing layers. So let's go ahead and bring that in. So shift space, loader node. And on my loader node, I'm going to go to my multi-layers I did here, and I'm going to bring in this forest. And right now we're viewing the normals. So I'm just going to view the color. And because this is rendered in ACES and our timeline right now is on Rec 709, this is going to be a little dark. But we can change this in the display only, or we could always add a transform here. But we're going to operate like we would on a real project. And we want to keep this all in ACES, and this was exported in ACES CG. So what we can do within Fusion is we can just change this display LUT. That way we're still staying in ACES all the way out. So to be able to do that, we can go up here to our little LUT tab, and we can hit the down arrow and we can look for ACES transform. So now our ACES is just being transformed, or our display is being transformed like it's doing a color transform just on our display, but it's not affecting anything down here. So if we brought this all the way out to our media out, it would still be that dark. If we went to our, and I'll show you that. So if I went to my media out, you can see we're still working in the ACES transform here. And if I go to my edit tab, you can see it's still super dark because it didn't actually transform our color. We're still working in ACES. So back in Fusion. And if you're not getting this look when you select this ACES transform, you might not have anything in it. So if you go up to this edit tab and we bring this up, you can change what version of ACES you're using. I'm using 2.0. In an input transform, since I did ACES CG, I'm just selecting the ACES CG. And my output, I'm just selecting sRGB Gamma 2.2. So now we can see it. And yes, this image was actually pretty dark, so we would lighten it up anyway. It's a dark forest, so that's why it's dark. Now on this EXR, let's go ahead and look at our layers. So on our layers, we have all of our typical layers we export out. But when I was exporting out of Blender, I did multiple view layers, but for some reason, my little orbs that we have in this shot all came on the same layer, and my orb layer had absolutely nothing in it other than the combined. So something happened in my render, but we can work with this, and this will just allow us to kind of go over some troubleshooting stuff. If you say got passed along this EXR and this is what you got and it's not supposed to be, there's fixes to all this stuff. So additionally, let's go up to our channels, and right now we only have our color, which is our RGB, and then our alpha channel. So we need to assign these channels so we can use this in the Swizzler node correctly. So if we go to our little forest EXR and go to our format and select channels, we can go down here and assign all of our channels correctly. So under our RGB and A, I'm going to select our forest combined R, our forest combined G, our forest combined B, and our forest combined alpha. So now I've got the right channels for my RGB and A. We also have a Z channel, so I'll look for my forest depth Z. We do not have a Z back. We don't have a coverage ID, material ID. I did not export separate UVs. We do have normals, however, so I can go to my forest normal X, forest normal Y, and forest normal Z. And for our velocity, we can use our vector X and our vector Y. I did not do a reverse. For our position, we can use our forest position X, forest position Y, and forest position Z, and I did not do any disparity channels. So now if we right click, we look at our channels, we now have our color channels, our alpha, our depth, our normals, our vectors, and our positions. So these are the channels we want to use to push through. So if we jump on our little Swizzler node, you can see we have an input. So this is going to be image 1 input. And as soon as we input something into image 1, we're going to get another image input pop up. So there's our second image input. So now if we look at our Swizzler node, this is what it looks like. So we have a layers list. So the point of the Swizzler node is to build layers. And I'm going to work simple first, and we'll get into more in-depth stuff when we go over some of this other stuff. So basically, in its simplest form, we have a layer. So we can double click on this and we can rename our layer. So let's rename this to forest, because this is going to be our forest, our main forest layer. If we need to add another layer, which we will, we select this add layer. This keep main input layers, if we check that, it's going to preserve existing layers from our source clip that's connected to input 1. And having it enabled will pass the layers from the input 1 to the Swizzler output, giving you control to add more layers. So it's just going to pass along. If we select this, it's just going to keep it all and pass it right along. But we're going to leave this unchecked because we're going to add some more layers to it. And right down here, you can see it now says forest, because this is all of our channels within our forest. So under channels, this means we want to bring across all channels. So if we look at our Swizzler node, we right click, you can see we've got all of our channels. So we're bringing all of those in. If we were to select color auxiliary, we have the ability to select different independent color and auxiliary channels. And we're going to do that when we build more. So I'm going to leave this on all channels right now. So our source input is input 1 right here. And our source default layer, we're going to go ahead and leave on main. And there's a reason behind this, because right now, if I select my channels and I can see all my channels, if I change this to say another one to forest combined, I just lost all my channels, because the only layer that has all of our channel information is our main. So let's go ahead and clean this up too, since we have all this stuff we really don't need within our channel layers right now. So if you remember right, a good way to clean up layers is to use the layer remover. So we can hit shift space, layer remover, and we can add it. Now in our layer remover, let's go ahead and get rid of this composite combined. We're going to leave our forest combined. We're going to leave our depth. We're going to get rid of this diffused color, direct and indirect. Get rid of our noisy image. We're going to leave our normal, our position, and our vector. And we're going to get rid of all this stuff that says orb, because this is our little orb that you don't see yet. And we'll bring that in here in a minute. And just know, using the little scroll wheel won't scroll this. So make sure you go down, because there's more layers. Now, one thing to remember is you might be apt to delete this main, because a lot of times we'll delete mains to clean stuff up. But if we look right now, we have all of our channels. If I delete my main channel, you can see one, we got an error on our Swizzler because we lost channels. And to show that, if I go back to my layer remover and select my channels, now we only have our color and our alpha. But if I unselect this and don't delete my main and leave it in there, if I look at my channels, I've got my normals and depth map and all that stuff back again. So using the Swizzler node, or to ensure we're using our actual channels, we want to make sure we do not delete this main. So, and as a reminder, if you're a little confused, remember we have channels and we have layers, and they're different. So our channels are the independent channels within our layers. So just remember that your layers and your channels are different. So back to the Swizzler node. So as I said, we're going to leave this on source 1, and our layer we're going to leave on main. So we need to bring this orb in. So I am not going to bring in the EXR for the orb because it was incorrect, but we can use the same one. And there's many ways to do this, but just for simplicity's sake and visualization, I'm just going to copy this, paste it, and this is going to be our orb layer. And let's go ahead and just rename that. So I'm going to hit F2 and rename it to orb layer. There we go. So this is our orb, this is our forest. Now on our orb, we need to go ahead and change our little channels here. So let's go to our channels under the format tab. And instead of our forest, we're going to use our orb channels. So for our RGB and A, let's go to our orb, combine R, orb, combine G, orb, combine B, and orb, combine alpha. So now we've got our main channels for our little orb that's floating through our little forest there. And down here, we'll change the rest of this. We'll change our normals, and we'll change our velocities, and we'll change our position. So now we've got all of our channels correct here on our little orb. If we look, we've got all of our channels. We've got all our different crazy layers. And of course, we've got too many layers. Let's go ahead and delete these. So let's add another layer remover. And let's clean up our layers here. On our layer remover, we're going to get rid of our composite combined and everything that says forest. And under our little orb here, we're just going to get rid of a few of these channels. We'll leave our mic, get rid of our noisy, and we'll leave the rest of that. Now if we look at our channels, we've got our channels and our layers are down to minimum. And again, if we deleted this main and we look at our channels, we just lost all our channels. So remember not to delete that main. So now we've got all our channels back. Now we can bring this into our Swizzler to image 2. And let's go to our Swizzler node. And right now we've just got our forest. So let's add another layer and let's call this orb. So now we've got our orb layer. And to be able to view it, we can just uncheck this forest. And now we'll be able to view our little orb channel. But right now it's incorrect because first thing we need to do is we need to change our source. Remember, it was source 2. And our default layer, let's go ahead and make our main so we make sure we bring in all those channels. Because if I change the source layer to our combined, we just lost all of our channels. So let's leave it on main. Now the Swizzler node is not meant to act as a merge node. So if I turn our forest node on, you can see we're not seeing stuff on top of other stuff. It is not meant to do that. And if we look at our Swizzler node, now we have 2 layers, orb and forest. That's what the Swizzler node did, is it combined our different channels and our different layers to create new layers that are easier for us to work with. So as I said, within these different channels, we can also select color/auxiliary. And the way this works is we can change how we're bringing in our color channels. So right now, under color, we have RGB and A, which means our source is using whatever source we tell it to bring in under the RGB and A channels, all in the same little file. If we have separate alpha channels, we can select the RGB/A. So now we can select our RGB source, and then we can go to our alpha source and we can select a different one. So if we just wanted to use our orb combined, we could bring that in if our alpha was different on our orb combined. Same goes with R/G/B/A. If we have independent files for our red, our green, our blue, and our alpha, we can bring in individual layers or images. And if we're only bringing in an alpha channel on this specific layer, we can just select our alpha channel. So let's leave that on R, G, B, and A since it's all the same file. Now under here, right now, this is how we're bringing in our auxiliary channels or our auxiliary information. So right now it's telling us our source is coming from input 2, our main layer, and our channels are just matching that layer, which means if we go to our channels, you can see all of our channels. But if I wanted to make sure I was using the same channels as, say, the forest layer, I could simply just say input 1, and I want that main layer with all my channels. So I've got all my channels, but they're going to be different, obviously, because they're two different images. So put that back in image 2. Now, additionally, we can go per channel to change information. So I can go to the channels. Now, under channels, I can select independently different sources. So let's say our Z-depth was changed. One of our artists who passed along this info said, hey, I messed up our little Z-depth information here. So here's the updated file with our Z-depth information. So what we could do is let's just copy this and let's pretend this is our new Z-depth information. So I'm going to go here first. Let me change the name to Z-Pass new. So there's our new Z-Pass right here. And when we got it, let's go to our format. All we had under this was our Z-Pass information. So let's get rid of everything other than our Z-Pass information that was given to us. And oops, I probably want to leave these. So if we look at our channels, you can see we've got our color, our alpha, and our Z-depth. And again, here we've got multiple layers on here. So let's go ahead and add a layer remover. So we can remove these additional layers, and let's get rid of all this stuff. Other than our combined and our depth and our main, of course. So now if we look at our layers, we've got our, we don't want our forest position. If we look at our layers, we've got our orb combined and our orb depth in the main, of course. In our channels, we've still got our color, our alpha, and our depth. So on our Swizzler node, let's say we need to update that Z-depth information. So we can take our new Z-depth layer, input it into input 3. And if we go here to our Z source, we can select input 3 layer. We can select our depth layer if we want. And we can even change this to Z buffer data if we want, or we can leave it on match. It's going to know. So now we have multiple layers still creating our little orb layer that's coming out using multiple different files. Now, additionally, under our channels for our auxiliary, we can still change, say for our background color here. If we brought in a separate background color, we can use that RGBA. If we have a separate alpha channel on a different layer, we can select that. So we can bring in another one, or we can still do separate R, G, B, and A, or just A if we just have alpha on our background layer. And additionally, we can change our coverage source independently, our object ID source, our material ID source, our UV texture. Now under our UV texture, we have the option to just use a single source as our UV texture, or if we have multiple sources coming in, we can select this UV, so we can select independent sources for the U and the V texture. Same with our XYZ normal, if we have a single for our normal, which we do. Or if we have independent ones, we can bring in independent ones. And same goes with our vector. If we have a single vector, or if we have separate X and Y vector data. Same with our back vector, our XYZ position, and our disparity. So you can see the Swizzler node allows us to independently change files for each individual channel element, so we can bring it in through a separate layer or a separate image. So now that we've got our two little layers built here, this is what you would use to pass along to start building your composites. So if I brought in, say, a merge node, and again, this is the simplest form. In real compositing, this would be a huge nightmare of a network, and eventually I'll do a tutorial on that. It'll be a long tutorial, but I'll do a tutorial on it. So we can go from our Swizzler node into our background and into our foreground. So now we've got two layers coming in. So if I go to our merge layer here, we can go to our settings tab and we can say process all layers. So if you look, we've got our little orb in our forest, and we still have all of our channels coming through. So then I can go to my background and I can say forest for my background layer. And I want my orb as my foreground layer. So now we've got our little orb composited on top of our forest in here, and we can make any changes we want. We can bring in a color corrector on our little forest background and lighten it up so you can kind of see what's going on here. So we can bring up our gamma. And it's not quite working right because we need to go into our color correct and go to our settings and process all layers. So now it is working correctly. So now we can go to our color corrector and change our gamma up. And we can bring that saturation down so it's not so crazy. And there you go. We can also independently do things to our little orb, say bring in a blur node, and we can change the blur on our orb if we want, and change the blend mode. So now we've got our little orb glowing there. So that is the Swizzler node. I will see you in the next node breakdown.